Hello. This afternoon we're going to continue with In the Meantime. And today's installment is some reflections and a little research about contagion in churches. The typical passing of the peace at Grace is a disease-sharing field day. We get close to each other in dense assemblies. We hug, we talk, we kiss, we shake hands. The peace of Christ is the antithesis of physical distancing. Later, we go to the communion rail and drink from the common cup. What are we to do? The communion cup was first shunned during the AIDS epidemic and will now be even more of an anathema. A 2005 article from the Los Angeles Times provides good information about contagion and the common cup, going back before the 1917-18 flu pandemic, but obviously not covering the current outbreak. An Episcopal priest in, ironically, Corona del Mar, California, brought in a team of microbiologists, epidemiologists, and infectious disease specialists to talk to his congregation during the early days of the AIDS epidemic. Here's what they said. Quote, "The number of bugs you can get from a communion cup don't have a prayer. The chances of getting sick are less than talking after the service with someone who has a cold." Concerns about catching the disease date to the 19th century and have spiked during epidemics, whether it was diphtheria and tuberculosis in the late 1800s, the 1917-18 influenza outbreak, polio in the first half of the 20th century, or AIDS in the 1980s, and of course today with COVID-19. With the common cup of communion, though, there are several factors to keep in mind that are in favor of people and very unfavorable for viruses and bacteria. These include: 1, the cup is wiped between each communicant. 2, the alcohol content of port wine used in communion is 18 to 20%. While that's not a disinfectant level, it does kill a significant portion of microorganisms. Thirdly, wine is very acidic, which is also unfavorable for viruses and bacteria. And the tannins in red port wine are also antimicrobial. Finally, with a silver or gold chalice and even plated vessels, the metal itself kills viruses and bacteria in a fraction of a second. So unlike ceramic or glass chalices, which should be avoided, the heavy metals, silver and gold, are themselves virucidal, and your lips will never touch a live organism on them. One microbiologist Episcopalian conducted 2 studies in the 1990s. The first laboratory study simulated a passing of the peace in church among 10 participants. Then they were given the typical communion wafers that had previously been sterilized. She found that after the laboratory communicants touched the bread, that bacteria on their hands went into and onto the communion wafers. Viruses were not studied at that time, but we can presume that they would transfer about the same. She also did not study the fate of microbial contamination after the wafers would be dipped into the communion wine, but at least the study gives us a good start. Next, she examined the rate of illnesses between those who attended church taking communion and those who don't. In a New Jersey sample of 681 church attenders compared against a much larger general population in same demographic neighborhoods, she found no difference, 0 difference, in illness rates between the 2 populations, even comparing some Roman Catholics who attended church every day during the 10-week study period. Now, note that this is not a statistically significant, randomized, double-blind clinical trial. It is only suggestive. Presently, there is no data to guide us whether the SARS-CoV-2 virus responsible for the COVID-19 disease is more or less resistant to communion wine factors as AIDS and more common flu viruses. As a result, most Catholic, Episcopal, and Greek Orthodox dioceses banned the common cup even before the quarantine orders. This will likely continue to be the practice after we start getting back together. We do have some early data that is encouraging, however. Quote, other epidemiologists note that the main driver of how the virus, in this case COVID-19, has spread so far does not seem to be the sort of temporary casual contact experience in church services, but rather household level infection, the kind of prolonged exposure family members face when living with or caring for someone who is sick with the virus. The important consideration for getting back together is to exclude vulnerable populations, such as the elderly and the immunocompromised, that is, those undergoing or following cancer treatment. One thing all of us could do in the meantime is to contact the younger people, those under 50. Invite them to church when we open up again. Start those conversations with them about just who Grace Episcopal Church in Muskogee is and what we stand for. With some effort, we just might lower the average age on Sunday. God bless you.